Hi, my name is Matthew Bellisario with the BellisarioSonic YouTube channel. Thanks for coming by and checking out this episode. I always introduce this channel by telling you where I am. I say I'm in the heart of the Deep South on the outskirts of Birmingham, Alabama. And then I tell you briefly what the channel's about, where I talk about music, talk about records, do record reviews, interviews, and more. Today, I'm really happy to be bringing you an interview, or should I say a conversation, because that's really what these are. They're more conversations than an old-fashioned interview. And even though I have a lot of questions that I like to ask these very generous artists that come on this channel and spend an hour of their time talking to me, which I'm very grateful to have them do that, there are more conversations than they are interviews. And a lot of times I don't even end up asking all of the questions that I want to ask, just because the way the conversation itself, goes. Today, I'm really happy to be bringing you an interview with Miguel Atwood-Ferguson. And I've told you guys that the main focus of this channel, or a large part of this channel, is aimed at promoting working musicians. That is, people that are putting out records today, new music, new recordings. As much as I love all the legacy recordings, as much as I love the reissues, and I still do some of those. You guys know I'll still do the Atlantic 75th reviews, for example, or do the Blue Note reissues or the Acoustic Sounds Verve and different things like that. I'll still continue to do those. But you notice that probably more than 50% of my reviews are of a lot of artists that aren't that well known. And that's very important to me, because I've always been one of those people ever since I was in my teens that always wanted to share new music. When I discovered a new band or something like that, I always wanted to share that with my friends. And I consider all of you out there that come to this channel friends, in a sense that I'm sharing new music with you guys. I welcome you into my home, and in order to listen to these records with me. And I love playing the records for you guys and promoting these working artists. So let's make a long story short and get to the interview, which you came to this channel hopefully to watch. Miguel Atwood-Ferguson, on over 600 recordings. Very generous to come and give his time to talk about this 4-record album that it's taken him probably close to 14 years to make, in between all of his many projects that he's been working on. And this is an impressive body of work. If you missed the review I did of this, go back and check it out. It's one of the longest reviews, because there's 4 records and I played something off of all 4 records. So it's like an hour and a half record review. So a beautiful record. A mixture of genres. It really takes you on a journey, but Miguel takes the time to talk about his career a little bit, how he thinks about music, and how he put together this incredible 4-record album, of which is only the first of 3 parts. This is over 3.5 hours worth of music. You're going to have 2 more parts. Hopefully, maybe next year we'll be getting part 2, which will be another 3.5 hours, and maybe the year after we'll get the 3rd part. So when this is all done, we'll have over 10 hours worth of music that Miguel had put out of his own. He wrote all of these songs, arranged everything, and it's very impressive. So I really think that more people should know about Miguel, and more people should know about this album. Again, if you missed the review, go check it out. But I bring you this wonderful interview with Miguel Atwood-Ferguson. All right, welcome to the BellisarioSonic YouTube channel. Today I have a very special guest that I'm very happy to have on, Miguel Atwood-Ferguson, who is a Los Angeles-based multi-instrumentalist, session musician, arranger, composer, music director, producer, DJ, orchestral conductor, and music educator. Thank you, Miguel, for taking the time to come on the channel.
Man, my honor. Good morning.
Good morning. So I just want to talk a little bit about, so people know who you are. I had no idea how many recordings you've done and all the different things you've been involved with, so I've tried to condense it down here just so people kind of know where you're coming from. You started playing the violin when you were very young, around the age of 4. Mm-hmm. Amazingly, you play many instruments, the violin, the viola, the cello, bass, piano, keyboards, percussion. So you've done a lot of orchestral recordings where you play all the instruments yourself, which is amazing. You contribute to over 600 recordings. You've scored for music or for television and film, with various musicians, which I'll name some here in a minute. So at age 4, you were enrolled into violin lessons. You soon started taking music theory. You joined the orchestra da camera in the Colburn School from the age of 8 to 15, and you started composing your own compositions for symphonic orchestra. And your first composition was actually performed by the Pacific Palisades Symphony.
Just recorded in rehearsal.
Okay, well, that's pretty impressive. But at the age of 12, you switched to viola, but then you got interested in other music. From what I read, Motown, Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles. You performed with Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, Quincy Jones, Smokey Robinson, Dr. Dre, and a whole list of people. It would take me a long time to name them all. As a violist, though, you've appeared with Rihanna on the Jay Leno Show, Christina Aguilera with one of her MTV specials. You performed with John Legend, Kirk Franklin for the BET. You've played with Shakira, Wyclef Jean, Gnarls Barkley at the Grammy Awards in 2007, Hall & Oates on Jimmy Kimmel Live, and the list goes on. A lot of different orchestral settings you've played in. You also did the conducting and musical direction, which I found very interesting for the Kamasi Washington Epic Concert, which is really neat. You can see that on your website. And as a studio musician, again, countless people that you've recorded with: Mary J. Blige, Dr. Dre, Kobe Bryant, Eddie Murphy, Barry Manilow, Joss Stone. I love her. Michael Bublé, Randy Jackson. You played on the Ray Charles Grammy-winning album Genius Loves Company. And you're also involved in a lot of music education. So I could keep going on, but I don't want to take up the entire time we have of going through your incredible discography and all the projects you've been involved with. So thank you for coming on the channel. And I guess we could start by just telling us how you got into music as a child.
Oh, well, thanks for having me on, Matthew. It's really nice to meet you, and I look forward to checking out your channel more. That's the most extensive intro that anyone's ever done of me, I think, in my life. So it's just great to be here with you. I'm 44 years old, and I grew up in a really beautiful place of Los Angeles called Topanga Canyon. And so I was really lucky to grow up in nature. And so from an early age, I was extremely lucky, fortunate to be exposed to music practically from all around the world via recordings. My family didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't travel, we didn't take vacations, we weren't, eating fancy food or something, but my parents prioritized exposure to the arts, and I'm so thankful to them. My dad, who's still with us, is a fantastic musician, multi-instrumentalist himself, mostly piano and guitar, and he's a singer-songwriter, and he wrote a hit for the Carpenters and called You're the One. And he, like me, is a music geek, and he is a music historian, not by profession, but just by passion. And so he was somebody that was always reading books and listening to his 10,000 CDs. And he was exposing me to everything, from country music to opera to various folk music from around the world, like from places like Ireland and Scotland and Africa, Asia, many different countries. So to me, that was kind of the backdrop of my life. And so I was really lucky to have exposure to the music and then also to nature. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And to me, that's really important. And so that is reflected in this album that you're so kind to have even listened to. It's 3.5 hours. That's just volume 1. So yes. The whole thing is 10.5 hours long. Each volume is 3.5 hours long. And
it's incredible body of work.
Volume 2 is maybe about 50% done, and hopefully I'll be able to release that within the next 2 years. It just depends on whether I'll have enough money to afford the time that it takes. That's why it took me 14 years to record all this, because I would work on sporadically, and I don't have a lot of money, and so when I would have enough money to afford the time and afford to pay the musicians, then I would do some work on it. And it took 14 years, and I took my time on purpose. I wasn't rushing, but I also wasn't procrastinating. I was going as fast as I could without rushing. And so anyway, growing up in Topanga Canyon, being exposed to diverse music and diverse cultures and nature, it made me feel connected and curious about the multiverse, and it put me on a path to want to continue learning forever and connecting with something bigger than the music industry. Not that there's anything wrong with the music industry, but there's something transcending the music industry that I'm interested in. I want to work with the music industry,
Sure.
but I'm not trying to just fit in to the pre-existing norms, if that makes any sense.
Right. Sure.
And
Yes.
this album is an example of that. So I left mistakes on it on purpose, because I think there's a time and a place to have perfection, or not perfection, but really cleanliness. There's a time and a place for that. But then also, I like the rawness sometimes, and the honesty that can come from an improvisation shared, or created, or shared in its entirety, that might have some small imperfections here and there. And so I made sure to leave that on the record. So that partially answers your question.
Yeah, yes, no. So, just talking a little bit before we get into the record more, because I definitely want to talk to you about how you put this together. And so, how did you pick strings? I'm just curious. You picked the violin, the viola. How did you pick that? Or I'm interested in
Oh
learning
yeah,
about that. So why
yeah.
not guitar
So
or
my
something
older,
else?
yeah, yeah. I'm getting into guitar now, funny enough. But at age 4, I actually told my mom that I wanted to play violin and actually take lessons. And so I had an older brother, 6 years older than me, and he was playing piano, and he was taking lessons via the Suzuki method.
Right. Okay.
And I went to one of the Suzuki institutes, that they would call it, and I saw my brother playing piano, with other kids his age playing piano. But then at the same institute, I saw a bunch of kids playing violin, and that's what did it. So I think it was a combination of the music that my dad and my mom were playing around the house, and they would have like these weekly, yeah, it was a combination of a couple of different things. They would have these weekly music get-togethers where they would just jam with some friends and sing. Um, Mostly covers, I think, but I think maybe they did some original songs too. So being exposed to that, being exposed to the recordings around my house, and then going to the Suzuki Institute. Those three, yeah. Once I saw all the kids, that was the first time that I saw kids my age playing musical instruments, and once it was overwhelming in a positive way to be able to see that many kids actually playing those instruments. And for some reason, I was drawn to the violin. So seeing all those kids play violin, I mean, there must have been a group of like 50 kids or something playing violin. It gave me the confidence to know that, hey, they're doing it. I can do it too. And so that's when I told my mom that I want weekly lessons. And bless her heart, she was kind enough to enroll me in Suzuki weekly lessons. And I did that for the next 6 years. It was amazing. And then I started studying privately, outside of the Suzuki method, and started writing orchestral music and playing chamber music and studying theory. And it just kept on growing. And went to a high school that blessed me with the opportunity to actually write music for the string orchestra and play in a very high quality school jazz band, and which I played electric bass and viola in, and so it was amazing. It was amazing. Like anything, it just takes time and heart, um, and there's something with, I like the phrase time spent. I really do think that everyone has the it factor, and I think it takes time. Obviously, it takes more than just time, but it takes time for starters to start to formulate a relationship with our own soul. And so, whether it's music or any other profession, it takes time. And so, being able to be lucky enough to actually play in it was a world class youth string orchestra. I'm referring to the high school, the orchestra at the high school that I went to, Crossroads in Santa Monica, California. They would have kids from all around the world come on scholarship to play in this orchestra. And so I was lucky enough to play in the orchestra and write music for the orchestra. And so
Wow.
that's what I'm referring to when I say time spent. So I wrote a viola concerto for myself as my senior project, and we would have two really intense, like 4 hour string orchestral rehearsals a week, with a world class conductor, Alex Traeger, who was at one point playing in the LA Phil for many years. So that it was amazing. So I put in serious time learning, not only how to write, in this case for string orchestra, but also how to put it together. Because you can imagine, it's one thing to write music. It's another thing to have a human being interpret that music and to rehearse it and to
Right.
possibly perform it and record it. So I was very, very fortunate to have a lot of time spent in high school and even before high school, with some of these endeavors. And it's there's no end, there's no limit to how much
That's
we can
incredible.
learn about these things. But yeah, that's a little bit more
Right.
background.
And then getting into the jazz, it's clear that you were very influenced by classical music.
Mm.
But how did you start leaning towards jazz, and what particular artist kind of got you excited about the jazz side? Because this is a pretty unique record. You really can't put it in any specific genre. It's to me a pretty bold release because it's four records. You have a mixture of genres. You've got classical, clearly. You've got electronic, some type of electronic music on there. You've got jazz, really intense jazz pieces on there. So, what drew you to the jazz? What musicians and what influences kind of brought you that direction to include that?
Mm. Man, great questions, dude. So I mentioned that my dad is a musician, but funny enough, he does not like any modern jazz. And in the way that he is defining modern jazz is like anything after 1964. And so he did play some John Coltrane, who is by far one of my favorite all-time human beings and artists. But the stuff he was playing was definitely, Train's more conservative stuff. It was actually my dad's brother, who is a recently retired physics professor, who is not a professional musician, but has this intense love for jazz music. And it was my uncle Lloyd Ferguson, my dad, who is Steve Ferguson, my dad's brother. Um, Lloyd Ferguson, my uncle, introduced me to Duke Ellington's music, and Art Blakey,
Oh yeah,
and Joe Farrell, funny enough. And so that is completely what set me off. So I was already listening to some Duke Ellington because my grandparents also liked Duke and were playing some of his music. And my dad played some early Duke. And so that was kind of already in the backdrop. But once I heard Art Blakey, and that introduced me to Bobby Timmons,
Okay.
and I just fell in love with the artistry of Bobby Timmons, the amazing pianist, gospel, funk, jazz pianist, amazing composer, and just incredible uh, pocket. His Bobby Timmons' pocket and sense of swing is just incredible. And via Art Blakey, we all know Art Blakey is one of the greatest all-time Americans, all-time musicians, and he was an institution unto himself. And he had a relatively long life. And as you know, there's hundreds of musicians
Everybody
went through
came through
him.
him.
Yeah, and same with Duke, but um, in a different way. And so via Art Blakey, not only was I enjoying Art Blakey's amazing drumming, which is to just, it's to die for. It's just cataclysmically sublime. Um, but I also got introduced to Wayne Shorter.
I was
And
going to ask you about him.
yeah, so Wayne and Herbie are two of the biggest influences on me, musically and outside of music. And so this all came through my Uncle Lloyd, introducing me to Art Blakey. And he also gave me a Joe Farrell album. I must have been like 14 or 15 years old, and he gave me three albums. He gave me an Art Blakey Night in Tunisia album. Um, I don't know if that's like from 1961 on Blue Note. And he gave me a Joe Farrell album with George Cables, and it was just fantastic. And he gave me a Duke Ellington album, and that's what set it off for me. And so then I became completely obsessed with jazz, and from Bobby Timmons, I got as many Bobby Timmons albums as I could get, and then I just fell completely in love with Wayne, and then the whole Blue Note uh, record label. I just
It's
became
incredible.
infatuated with, and I tried to basically listen to as many Blue Note albums as I could. And from Wayne, I got into Herbie, and that just set me off. And then I got basically just became completely obsessed with everything that these great artists did, and I tried to um, learn anything and everything I could about them as people and about their artistry. And I would be transcribing everything that I could from their records and trying to play it on the violin and the viola. And yeah, so one thing led to another, and then I fell in love with Miles Davis. I mean, by that point, I was already listening to early Miles because my dad was into early Miles and Charlie Parker. Um, yeah, so I was just completely obsessed with that music. And meanwhile, I was already way down the rabbit hole with Western European classical music and continuing to study that, perform that. And so I was mainly a classical musician, but the love that I was experiencing with jazz was just completely undeniable. And there was nothing that was going to stop it. Like, it was bigger than me. And I would listen to hip hop music tangentially, um, mostly for fun. I never thought that I would necessarily have a career related to hip hop music, but I had a sincere love of hip hop music as well. Tupac, A Tribe Called Quest, Snoop Dogg, Wu Tang, and I didn't know it until years later that Jay Dilla was the producer on some of this music that I was loving. It wasn't really until I became friends with Carlos Nino in 2005. So not even 20 years ago, 19 years ago, when I became fast friends with Carlos Nino, then he started teaching me about all these things that I didn't know about outside of the realm of classical and jazz. Yeah, so direct me and ask me questions because I could talk forever.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, it's fantastic. The Wayne Shorter, of course, he kind of started off in traditional jazz and started incorporating the kind of classical and different things into his music. Um, I'm curious. So you got to play with Wayne Shorter, correct?
One
You got
time, yes, he visited my college, and it was still to this day one of the highlights of my life. So he brought his quintet, and playing keys is another one of my biggest heroes. Playing keys with him that night was Brad Meldau.
oh wow, yeah, incredible player.
I'm obsessed with Brad. I just really can't get enough of Brad, and I'm so thankful for everything Brad has done. And so it was amazing. Wayne, yeah, brought that quintet, and we played his orchestral music. And so we got to have, two rehearsals with him and a concert. And by this point, I had been practicing the same Buddhism that he practices. He started practicing like in the early 70s, and I started practicing in 1999 because I was so influenced by him and Herbie. You know, him and Herbie both started practicing SGI Buddhism in the early 70s, and I was that fanatical about Wayne and Herbie, and I've always been curious about spirituality and religion. I find it fascinating studying everything. I, I'm so thankful that we even have the opportunity to study, whatever we want to study. And so I've always been fascinated with Eastern thought and different religions and philosophies. And even before I had known about Wayne and Herbie. And then once I fell in love with their music, um, I became more curious about them as people. Like, why do they think the things that they do? What do they think? What are their beliefs? And then I soon discovered that they were both practicing Buddhists for um, many, many years. And so I got into it, and it completely clicked with me. And so to this day, I still practice. It's been 25 years now I've been practicing consistently. And so I actually got to chant with Wayne before the concert when he came and visited my college, USC, here in Los Angeles. So not only was the music amazing on so many different level, on every level, but the fact that I got to connect with him as a person and actually, um, you know, chant with him. That's like our form of meditation, our form of prayer. Is it involves like a chanting practice. So it was amazing, and so I felt really empowered. And life can be so challenging, right? And I love America so much. I feel so lucky to live here. There's so many things about America that I love, but it's an interesting relationship we have with the arts. Um, in some ways, I think America is very supportive of the arts, but the infrastructures that exist aren't so highly functioning to support the arts. We
Right.
pour so much money into the military and all these
Exactly.
other um, directions, and I understand, you know, that people try to support the arts, but it's hard, is my point, to be a creative artist anywhere in the world. But funny enough, it seems to me that it's a lot easier in Europe, for instance. There's
Or even
institutions
Canada.
and infrastructures that are in place that
Right.
give millions and millions of dollars to the arts, and uh, we don't have as much of that here in America. And so my
No, sadly
point,
we don't.
yeah, and it can change. It doesn't have to remain this way, but right now it's more difficult than most people realize. Um, and so my point in saying all that is that the music, like being able to actually play the music, to play the instrument, to write the music, believe it or not, that's the easiest part. As difficult as that is, uh,
Right.
my point being that it's the hard part is to actually have a functioning, healthy life as a creative artist here in America. And so um, a lot of us just have to learn on our own how to do it. You know, in college, we're not really taught that. We're taught how to play our instrument. We're taught how to uh, write music or, technical things, very important things, but
Right.
we're not
How do you
taught
get it
how to
out
put,
there?
right. We're not necessarily taught um, how to put it in the context of making a living. And so there's a lot, thankfully with the internet, there's a lot of free resources out there and ways to educate oneself. But my point in saying all this is that I really appreciated the help that I got via this life affirming philosophy that I learned via Wayne and Herbie. It really it made all the difference for me. So it's interesting how the things that we love can connect us to other lessons in life. I think that's so
Sure.
interesting.
Yes, yeah, it is. Um, so that, what's really sad is we don't have anything really in the United States. I had a chance to talk to Corey Weeds, who owns Cellar Live or Cellar Music in Canada. He does jazz, he owns a jazz label, and he was talking about how in Canada he has access, to some funds because Canada will fund the arts. Where in the United States we really don't have a lot of that. And you're right, with all the money we waste on, God knows, we could be funding the arts, and be doing something to get this great music out to people. And if it's becoming harder, and that's before again we dive in a little bit into this album a little more. I do want to talk about, is it getting harder? Because I know with AI, okay, this is a big discussion point. Is like the UDO. I don't know if you heard of this website, UDIO, right? Well, people can go on there. You can actually type in what kind of music you want. It's pretty scary because you could pretty much go on there, type in a bunch of descriptive words, what you want it to sound like, what kind of instruments, and it will put out something that's fairly listenable. And people can do this in 30 minutes. You could write a 20-minute piece of music, or AI writes it and pulls it from all this stuff. Have you had issues, or do you see that taking away from composers, music scores, different things for commercials? Do you see that people going to that rather than paying a musician or composer, when they can just go on there, get the licensing from that, and then they own the music and they can just put it out? Do you think that's a danger?
Oh, yes, 100%. I'm a very idealistic person, sometimes to a fault, and I can also be naive in some ways. And so, at this particular stage of the topic of AI and the functionality of it, at this particular stage, I'm still optimistic that it's not going to be only a negative thing. I can easily see the negative things that it's already bringing. I can easily see that, but I think there is a chance, a big chance at the moment. We'll see, if we talk about this like a year from now, whether I've
Sure.
changed my opinion. But as of right now, I think that there's a lot of positivity that can come from it too, including us learning um, as human beings how to value things and how to heighten our awareness of what makes something emotionally stirring or not. And are we connecting and opening up deeper realms of humanity within ourselves or not? And I have a 4.5-year-old, and the last thing I want to do is see him hurt on any level. But I'm also aware that often the greatest teacher is struggle or pain or discomfort. And I look back upon my life, even though I'm only 44 years old, a lot of the greatest, most positive lessons that I've learned were connected to the most difficult moments of my life. And so part of me feels that there might be a chance that we can learn some really valuable lessons connected to AI. My worry is that the lesson, the cost of the lesson might be too great. So I'm
Sure.
definitely worried and scared about AI on one hand, but I'm also convinced, so far, I'm convinced that positivity can come out of it as well on a variety of levels. And not in all ways, but in some ways, it reminds me of discussions like this in the past as other technical things have been manifested, um, like uh, like for instance, a variety of DJ gear, and drum machines. Let's say drum machines. I don't know if they, I don't know if I've ever seen it in Alabama, but I've definitely seen it in California. Starting maybe in the early 2000s, there was a trend um, where there were car stickers that would say, like bumper stickers, they would say drum machines have no soul. Have you ever seen one of those?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and I definitely disagree with that sentiment, but I applaud maybe what might be some of the intentionality behind it. And I could see how somebody would think or could think that a drum machine has no soul. Um, but I think it's how we use something
Right.
is my point in bringing that up. How do we use something? Something can be used to, I think, open up our creativity and our empathy, our ability to be an empathetic um, human being, or it can, make us lazy or arrogant. So I think intentionality is really important, and I think, and again, maybe this is just naive of me, maybe it's too idealistic, totally possible that's what's going on with me right now. But right now, I do think that there's a possibility to use AI in a creative way that doesn't have to make us more dumb and
Right.
numb as
Or
human beings.
destroy or take away income from musicians and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we have a lot of learning to do, and I see the pathway of AI potentially just messing everything up,
Right.
or potentially forcing us to have to create more humanistic laws and support for real good art.
Which we're going to talk about now. Which we're going to. Which I really want to talk about this because this is fantastic. For records, I have a lot of questions about this because, for one, this I'm still trying to digest this, and I've listened to this on record like 3 times all the way through and streaming. And it's there's a lot to take in here. A lot of beautiful music from lush string arrangements all the way to intense jazz playing. First of all, why did you decide to put this out on, say, 4 records versus maybe a 2 double LPs or something like that? I'm just curious about that to start off with. This is a
Yeah,
huge body of work. It's
man, I
incredible.
love your questions, Matthew. Thank you so much again for listening and for having me on here and taking the
My
time to
pleasure.
do all the research. And your questions are so intelligent and relevant. Um, so I became fast friends with Flying Lotus in 2007-ish, 2006, 2007, and I helped him on his Cosmogramma album. And right after it came out, or I should say, in 2008, he started Brain Feeder, and then his Cosmogramma album that I worked a lot on came out, excuse me, in 2010. And right around the time that it came out, he asked me whether I wanted to do an album for Brain Feeder. And I was already being courted by Blue Note at the time, and I told Blue Note that I would really love to do an album for them, but that I'd already promised Lotus. So actually, I talked to Lotus first, and then later Blue Note started courting me, and I thought it was going to be maybe a double album. And as I started recording, I realized that not coming from a place of fear or trepidation, but more coming from a place of wanting to get the story right in terms of sharing my message of not only who I am, but what I'm interested in and some of the different genres and directions and energies that I go in and that I'm interested in. And so as I started doing these sessions, I realized, oh, okay, you know what? I'm getting the feeling that I should just record a lot and not try to necessarily pinpoint things for like a single album or even a double album. And so after about maybe 6 years or 7 years of doing sessions towards my album here and there, probably on average 2 sessions a year. So it's not like a whole lot, 2 or 3 sessions a year. The music started communicating to me that I should just record a bunch and then cherry pick sections and release it in a way that really like a garden, like a not a perfectly manicured garden, but like a somewhat sprawling and wild garden. I was feeling that would properly and accurately give people a chance to peer into my world. Because to be quite frank, Matthew, as much as I'm happy that people have listened to anything I've ever done, sometimes people, because I worked in different genres, sometimes people would misidentify me or misunderstand me, thinking that, oh, Miguel, that's the Dilla guy. That's what he does. That's only what he does. No, that's not true. That's not only that's one thing that I really, really love is the music of Jay Dilla. And then being able to reinterpret Jay Dilla's genius in a way that is sincere to me and unique to me. That's something I love doing. But that's only one thing I love doing. And it was kind of affecting my career. It was and kind of affecting my ability to be understood by people not having an album, a proper album that really would give people a chance to, like I say, peer into my world and not just peg me or pinhole me into like, oh, the guy that does strings for Lotus. There's all these other things that are really important to me. So I wanted to put it on an album. And as I started recording it, like I say, it felt to me like it was meant to be more of a multi-volume work, like a movie that can't just be the story from a movie just sometimes can't be just shared in one volume. Sometimes it needs to be part of a series. And so this is what's resonating for me. I feel so lucky to have worked for some of the pop acts that I've worked for, and it's great. But I wanted to take this opportunity to do something that was kind of anti-fad, anti-establishment, or just I just wanted to do something where it was just very honest and very me, and I'm not trying to fit into popular norms. And I believed in the relevancy of this existing. And so whether I'm not trying to make money with it, I wasn't trying to win awards with it. It was really just I wanted to create something. I wanted to challenge myself to create something as pure as I could in terms of just sharing my own honesty, sharing something that I found interesting and fun to make with my friends. So that's
Yeah.
a little story.
Yeah,
A little
yeah, because I think for something like, I was thinking about as I was listening to this, and I was like, okay, well, if somebody like Blue Note was going to put this out, they would probably go through and pick all the tracks that sound the same, right? Because all the jazz tracks, right, that sound, and then put those on one record. That way it would be that because that's how record companies think when it comes to marketing, which makes sense in a certain sense that, okay, we have this record and this all is a jazz record and this is, your work. This is, to me, very bold because it, like you say, it does not conform to any genre. It's a mixture. How did you decide what order to put these in? Like, as far as the song track running order, how long did it take you to figure that out? Or did you just kind of let things fall where they may? And how did that work out?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to give Flying Lotus some credit, because when I got close to handing in this album, so Flying Lotus is the creator and the owner of Brainfeeder Records, independent label that this Les Jardins Mystique Volume 1 is on. And when I got close to handing it in, he's like, yo, can we do exactly what you just talked about? He's like, can we put all the jazz tracks on an album and each split it, everything up? I'm like, no, we can't do that. That's not the narrative. That's not the story. That's not the expression that I want to share. It's really the narrative, how you go from one track to another. That's the story that I want to share. That's the expression. And I told him that, and I just want to give him credit because he didn't bat an eye. He didn't try to convince me. He's like, okay.
That's awesome.
So serious respect to Lotus. So in terms of the order, I have an interesting relationship with music that I really like, and it stems from wanting to be of service instead of me being like a taskmaster and telling music what it needs to do. I just want to be a facilitator for magic. I want to be a facilitator for the music, and because of that, I never have writer's block. I have a beautiful relationship in general with people, places, or things, because I respect this all and I want to be of service. And so along those lines, Matthew, even though this is all my original music, I still see myself as like being of service to it. And when I dialogue with what I perceive to be like the spirit of this music, it speaks to me and it tells me what it wants to do. And so dialoguing with this music, the order kind of just evolved and presented itself. And I would play around with different orders for sure. And not just different orders within each of whether it was the CD release or the vinyl release, but also towards the other volumes, because I mentioned that this is a 10.5-hour work split into 3 sections, 3 volumes. And so I would be playing around with taking certain things on and off volume 1 as well. And so as I just played around with it for a long time, maybe more than a month, once it felt right, that's what was released.
Gotcha. And how did you you thankfully put this on record, which I don't know. So the first copy I got, and this is just to let you know, first copy I got there was a lot of noise on the record. It was kind of a bad pressing, so I had to send it back and get another one. But let's hope that'll help you. But the second one that came in is absolutely quiet. It sounds fantastic, and it has to with this kind of music because there's so many dynamics with this music that if you get a bad pressing, it ruins the listening experience because you'll have the real soft passages and then the strings and all this kind of stuff. So I definitely wanted to let you know about that. Hopefully there aren't too many of those out there, but this one sounds fantastic. So definitely, how did you go about selecting the vinyl, or maybe the record company decided where to get these pressed and how many, all that kind of stuff? Is that how that works, or did you have a lot of input on that end, or no?
I did all the artwork along with David Crunell, so I had like a very heavy hand. I was very passionate with the artwork, but you're right. As far as like the technical things of pressing it up, that was from Ninja Tune, who Brainfeeder is connected to. So they're the ones that pressed it in the UK
Okay.
and figured out that, and they did this for Kamasi Washington's Epic album as well. They were able to,
Fantastic.
yeah, they were able to cut it at half speed. So, for instance, this volume one that you have next to you, if they didn't do it at half speed, it would have been 8 vinyls instead of 4. So, when you play the vinyl, it plays in normal speed,
Right.
but cutting it to wax, I don't know how they did it, but I know that they did it at half speed. So that was something that they decided. And I was the one that made all the visual artistic decisions, and all the photography is my photography. I'm really proud of that. And then and the concept was mine. The concept of the art and the layout. That was all my concept. And this guy, now he's living in Finland, but David Crunell is his name. Just a complete angel of a person and a really genius visual artist. I went to him. I found him via Instagram, I think, and I just fell in love with his artistry. And then it was just what a blessing to be able to talk to him and realize just what an amazing human being he is. And so, even though he's an incredible genius visual artist, he was so humble to take all of my directions. Like that's not hard. That's not easy to do. Take that.
Right.
I had very specific, I was very passionate about the artwork, so I knew I wanted it to be all my photography, and I tried to do it all myself, and I'm just not that good, I guess. I'm just not experienced at collages, and so he was able to take all my photos and take all my directions, and he
Yeah,
made
that's really
this
neat.
cool collage, 3D collage effect that you see there, and on the back, and it it's pretty close to
I
what I
think
was
I know
hoping
what you're
for. And then
talking
that's a photo I took on an airplane one day. Um, I forget where I was traveling to, and yeah, so
about. It's a
it was a bit
wonder.
of a team effort.
It's a wonderful sounding album. It really is. I mean, it sounds. You could hear the dynamics. It's a very warm sounding recording. I'm
Mm.
assuming this was recorded over years, as you've been talking about. How was it recorded? Did you go to a studio? Did you do a lot of it at home? Did people do different tracks and you did stems or exchange things? How did this kind of come together, and how are you continuing to do it?
Yeah, all of that, and that's how I'm continuing to do it. So I don't know how many recording sessions went into volume one. Um, if you count all the people that were recording individually at home, like during the pandemic, um, and I do that even outside the pandemic too. It's really cool that it's becoming more normalized that people record from home. Um, it's all beautiful, bro. Like being in the room with a bunch of people or doing it individually at home, there's magic to all that. And if it's done in a certain way. And so that's what we did. A lot of it was people recording together in the same room. A lot of people recording at home, and I gave directions towards everything. And I started in about 2010, 2011 were the first sessions. And the very first session, I guess, was actually a duet, me and Austin Peralta, and that was at a radio station called KPFK. And then the next one, I think, was with 11 people, and some of them were just me at home. And so you have a bunch of different studio environments, Benjamin Tierney was the one consistent mixing engineer from beginning to end, and serious kudos to him because he's also like David, who helped me with the art. Benjamin, in my opinion, is a genius musician, and he could have done a great job without me. But I have a very, very specific, clear idea of how I want things to sound. And so, serious respect and kudos to Benjamin for being humble enough and patient enough. You know, yes, I was paying him well, but you know, at that point of how much patience it takes to do something like this,
Sure.
money doesn't really matter. That it makes a difference for sure, but my point is it took a lot for someone that could have done a good job without me. Um, I've been playing in orchestras for many decades, and I have a very specific idea of how I want things to sound on every level, from the reverbs to the panning to how it feels
Right.
to the EQ. And so I don't have the technical ability. I don't have the technical skills to mix everything myself. I can do a lot, but there's a lot that I can't do. So I worked with Benjamin on everything. There's two tracks that I mixed myself, but the other 50 tracks on
Yeah.
Volume One, he worked with me, and so I had a lot of input. Some of the mixes, we would do like 14 different versions of.
Wow. Yeah.
Some of them just two or three
Right.
versions, but it's a lot.
And then you have to listen to them at different places. Did you take the mixes and listen to it on, on your home stereo, in your car, and all that? Because I play around just for fun here in my studio, just doing things, and I'll put it on my home stereo, and I'll be like, "Oh, this sounds great." And I go in my car and put it on, I'm like, "This sounds terrible in my car." Did you do a lot of that?
Yeah, yeah. So you're absolutely right. That's how I think we are able to formulate a deeper relationship with specifically a mix and the music is playing it in different environments. So my favorite environment historically has always been my car. And then the most important for me is headphones. So that's it's intent. The music is intended. That music right there is intended to be enjoyed anywhere. From computer speakers, which are notoriously the worst,
Right.
lacking bass and body, and there's compression sometimes that I think is a result of the computer. Uh, but yeah, I usually mix with headphones and then test it as many different places as I can. Definitely the car. I live in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is such a sprawling city, and so it's a car city. And so I try not to drive too much, but there is a lot of time in the car. So it's also a great place to maximize my time by working on mixes in the car. So
Sure.
while trying to drive as safe as I could, I've tried to, make notes about the mixes too. So yeah,
It's a lot of work. It's again very impressive and a lot to digest. It's really is a sprawling piece of work, and it's really listening to each record. You put it on and you go through, and it's like a journey. You're taking us on a journey, and it sounds absolutely fantastic. And as far as the people that played on this, which is I think like over 50 musicians, something like that. These are mostly people that you've played with before that you were able to come, invite them to come on and play. Is that how that
yeah,
worked? And pretty much, you also pretty much financed this endeavor on your own, right? I mean, you kind of
yeah.
did all
I
the.
spent my life savings on it. It was about $120,000.
Wow.
Um, I think 10,000 of it was an advance, or I got $5,000 as an advance from Brain Feeder, and then when I handed it in, they gave me another 5,000. But yeah, besides that, I paid for everything. I did some trades too with people on it. So most people I paid, but some people were nice enough to let me trade hours. That's how I like to do it when I do trades is trade hours because I like the idea of people's time being equitable. Like 1 hour of my time, I think, is worth an hour of anyone else's time.
Right.
And especially these great musicians. So, yeah, a couple people I traded with, and yeah, it'd be amazing, if I can make that money back someday. And if not, that's okay too, because that's the place I had to get to emotionally and spiritually in order to create this music. Is I made a deal with myself that I really truly wasn't going to have expectations of, like I say, winning awards or making money. I'm not trying to be popular. I'm just trying to be genuine and just grow as a human being. And that's what, so far, and I think likely for the rest of my life, the art is going to be reflecting what's going on the inside. So
Right.
my philosophy is if I continue to grow as a human being, that's going to put me in the best place to make the type of music that I'm interested in making.
Nice. So, what are your upcoming projects? I know that you're still working on Volume 2 and Volume 3, or when are we looking at those coming out? And then, what other things
Um,
do you have going on?
oh, thanks for asking. Well, if I'm able to have enough time and money, like I mentioned earlier, that means that I can say no to other work, working for clients, and just focus on finishing volume two and volume three, which is really a joy. It really, even though it's so much hard work that goes into it, it's really joyful for me. That's why I think I was born. One of the main reasons why I was born is to create this music, I think. Um, so I can't perfectly predict my financial situation. Uh, the career continues to have an upward trajectory, thankfully, and thankfully, hopefully I'll continue just to, have my star rise. And so realistically, I think Volume Two can be released in the next 3 years, and hopefully much sooner. There's a possibility it could be released next year. I doubt it. I think it's more like a 2027, a 2026 or 2027 release for Volume 2. And then the same thing for Volume 3. Um, Again, depending on how much time and money I'll have. So
Sure.
this Volume 1 is getting a lot of love, and it's given me a lot of encouragement, and it's given me a feeling that I will be able to have a functioning career as a solo artist, um, a creative artist too. This is not the most accessible music. I think it takes a lot. I think it takes a lot to listen to it. And the people that are brazen enough, daring enough to listen to this music and like really sit with it, I think the rewards are big, but it takes a lot, is my point. It's like, not that I have any amount of greatness compared to Shakespeare, but when you think of like Shakespeare, I think it takes a lot to like really put in enough to get out, to like really squeeze all the value, because there's so much
Sure.
value in Shakespeare, but like it takes some work. So anyway, that's my goal, is to potentially be that great someday, that there's that much value. To me, that's the life that I'm trying to live, and it's very possible I will never reach any level of quality good enough, to be able to create that much value, but I'm going to certainly try.
I
And
think
it's,
I think you've done so on this record for sure.
oh, thanks for the
And
encouragement.
and
I mean,
again, oh, it's wonderful. And yeah, it does take, you know, unfortunately, I think with today's music environment, it's playlists. It's putting together your favorite pop tunes for a lot of people, not for everybody. A lot of people, though, they go on Spotify or whatever, they got their playlist, and a lot of it's pop music, which there's nothing wrong with pop music. But when you listen to this, yes, it takes some intellectual. You have to pay attention and listen. Sit down and really listen. And a lot of people don't sit down and put a record on anymore and just sit there and listen to an entire album, which is sad because this is how you want to listen to this. Whether or not you can do all have time to do all 4 records at once. But you can play one record in a sitting, play the next one, and so forth. So I think that's a great thing. Have you considered, so for example, for Blue Note or something like that, are you totally against saying, okay, you know what, I am going to do just an all jazz record, put it together, get it out to Blue Note, let them put that out? Are you against doing that at all, or have you thought about that, or is that something you're just not interested in doing?
I look forward to doing something like that a lot, and I look forward to making all sorts of types of original records. This is a concept album, and it's really fun, I think, to adhere to certain concepts. And there's a way to be small-minded about it, or there's a way to be to embrace like a concept in a way that's very open and warm. And I'm definitely going for the warm approach. But yeah, for sure. So after I do these 3 volumes, my plan is to, like, I was the only composer on all these tracks, and for all of Les Jardins Mystiques, I want to be the only composer. But after Les Jardins Mystiques, I look forward to doing co-writes with people on my albums, for instance. I look forward to, yes, doing some albums where it's just, a particular type of jazz and no other genres. So the dream is to make a lot of music with a lot of different people and try different concepts. And, I have a dream of having my own record label as well. I look forward to writing books, so yeah, for sure.
Okay, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. We're already over an hour, and I know your time is valuable. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk about this record and about your career. And I really wish you well, and I hope I'll do everything I can to get, hopefully more people will listen to this record and buy it, because it's fantastic. So I really appreciate you doing this.
Oh, dude, bless your heart, Matthew. You are cool, bro. You are one cool customer, man. Massive respect to you.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and stop this.